Hello and welcome to this edition of Consciousness Raising Online. This particular session is happening on the weekend that we changed times. It was what fall back. So hopefully you corrected your time, your clocks. And if not, then you can always watch this on the replay. The topic today, actually, I changed the topic at the last minute because I was just, this is an election weekend. On Tuesday, coming Tuesday, will be the 2018 elections, and it's what they call off year elections. And it's shaping up to be one of the most important elections, period, in many, many, many years, particularly because of the state of the country. Um, 2 years ago, uh, the person who became president, I call him the resident, I call him 45, I call him many different names, uh, was able to get into the White House, and he has not stopped in fueling, I call him a hate monger, because he has been steadily fueling hate and prejudice across this country. And he got elected with a quote base. And the base, okay, good to see you, Clyde. It's okay. Um, he got into office with a so-called base, which even the mainstream media has now acted like it's a huge number, but it actually was less than 30% of the eligible voters, and it was less than the popular vote. But it didn't matter because he managed to get in there. Um, and like I say, he has been fueling hatred ever since. This country has gone so far, what I say is backwards. And it has allowed so many hidden racists to come out of their closets and out of their holes in the ground. And I think what's most frustrating, maybe to many black people, is that we've seen this before. It's nothing new to us. To see the mainstream media and the mainstream politicians and pundits and everything continuously normalizing racist behavior, apologizing for it, dancing around racism. It's extremely frustrating, and to some, it's very discouraging. Because for some of us, we say we done fought these fights before. Why we got to fight them again? And our children, many of our children, don't understand uh, where this is going. When we saw some young black people at the White House recently cheering on this dude and his policies, they were shouting, "Build the wall." I mean, we many of us were stunned because we said, "What the hell is going on?" Well, I want to back up to one of the things that I believe is key to what we have going on today. Uh, it was a law, it was a Supreme Court decision that occurred uh, in April of 2014. Okay. Um, I believe it was partially in response to the fact that at that time there was a black man occupying the White House. And there were some folks that were seriously trying to make sure that would never happen again. And so the Supreme Court made a ruling. It struck down limits on campaign contributions. Okay, now here's why this is so important. It was a 5-4 decision, of course, with the quote conservative justices striking down the limit on the total amount of money wealthy donors can contribute to candidates and political committees. Okay, um, and this was like the fifth decision since these two conservative, Roberts and Alito, joined the court, and they agreed with the other conservatives that that there were laws that were hurting the electoral process, and so they went after the laws or went along with knocking down laws that put limits. Now, what that did, and there may have been some discussion and talk about it in the media at the time, but it really did not. They didn't serve the people well, in that they didn't make them know what was going on, really, because what that allowed was well, let me read what part of the opinion, the main opinion was. It said, "There's no right more basic in our democracy than the right to participate in electing our political leaders." Justice Roberts wrote, "We have made clear that Congress may not regulate contributions simply to reduce the amount of money in politics or to restrict the political participation of some in order to enhance the relative influence of others." And what that basically said was, no, we believe that whoever got the most money gets to spend the most money. And if you don't have the money, too bad. And it was a case that actually started in 2010. The Citizens United versus the FEC, which allowed corporate spending on elections. So what you had was just an open door at that point uh, for wealthy people and corporations to give all kinds of money, not just to candidates, but also to PACs, to political committees, political action committees. That's what a PAC is, PAC. Um, and just it dramatically increased spending on campaigns, and it also spawned a whole new wave of political organizations funded by wealthy individuals. We have seen and we have been seeing and what that did, because it literally allowed for millions and millions and millions of dollars to be spent by wealthy people in races in states all across the country to influence the entire Congress, the Senate, and the House, and governors' races, uh, presidential races, all of that. I'm telling you, this was one of the most critical Supreme Court decisions in modern history. And what it did to us, what it did to us. I live in Illinois. We have two billionaires running for governor. They have both spent hundreds of millions of dollars of their own money to run for governor. The one who is the governor, he spent millions of dollars of his own money last election to get elected. It effectively, all over the country, we have seen that the consequences of this is that if you, no matter how qualified you might be, if you cannot raise the money or if you don't have the money, big money, you can't even get in the race. And that has fundamentally shifted the politics in this country to the right because most wealthy people are, quote, conservatives. And it has allowed the rich and the wealthy to seriously, um, to seriously maneuver and manipulate the electoral process. In that, in the midst of that, because of the election of 2008 and 2012, with Barack Obama being a black man who won the presidency in both of those years, and it built up just a huge amount of resentment and anger and hatred and racist hatred and what we call the backlash. In the midst of that backlash, you had a dude get in the race with never been in any kind of electoral contest before and ran all the way to the presidency on the basis of racism, sexism, whatever that word is for people who don't like, quote, outsiders or people from other countries, whatever, want to shut the country down to make it an isolationist country, all of those things. And he said it straightforward. And the media, the mass media, aided and abetted him because the first way they dealt with it was treating it like it was a joke. And then the second way they dealt with it was normalizing it after he won. That has been what's been taking place. He has been allowed to say whatever he wants. And you have some media counting the lies, and you have others who have been normalizing it. And what I mean by normalizing it, it means that rather than come out straightforward and say he's a liar, see, it's one thing to tell lies. It's a whole nother thing to be a liar. And what is the difference? Well, a liar is someone who the majority of the time tells lies. Okay? He lives on lies. He thrives on lies. And he tells lies from one end of the country to the next, to the other, from one country to the next, 24 hours a day. He tweets. And that's been the other piece that has allowed for the shifting of the electoral body, that you have a dude who got into the White House and he completely changed the way in which the executive branch deals with the public and with the world. This guy uses a social media called Twitter as his official presidential communication. And he has literally been allowed to do this to the extent that the past ways of dealing with the executive branch, that of the daily press conferences in the White House, they don't hardly do those anymore. And check this out. What that did was that was the place where the media of the world came. They had somebody there to monitor what the executive branch does, and then wipe that out. When was the last time you saw one? You might get one or two, maybe a month now, and sometimes they're not even inside; they just outside. What's her name? Sarah Suckerby, whatever. She might just be walking around outside and just decide to have the press conference out there. It's insane. And they allowed this dude to make Twitter his official channel to communicate to the world. And I said this years ago. I said, had they not used, if they had not used Twitter as the primary communication, had they not repeated the tweets and forced them to have to come or to deal with the press conferences, half of this stuff he wouldn't have been able to get away with, because if he didn't have to, see, he tweets and the whole press corps repeats his tweets. And once he saw that this would work, they could get away with it, he has used it nonstop. And he's used it to put out just total lies. This is what's very frustrating. For him to be able to put out a total lie, the media then repeats the lie as his Twitter, as his tweet. And instead of saying the president has filed another tweet that is full of lies and therefore we're not going to repeat it, what do? They repeat it. So, and they repeat him saying stuff like what he told a reporter who asked him why did he attack the media, because that's what kills me. He attacks the very same media that turns around and gives him all his play, right? And he was asked, why does he attack the media? And he said, I do it so that when you all say things that I don't like, then the people will not believe you. Think about that. He attacks the media, calls them fake news, attacks the media so that when they print or say the truth, all he has to do is say is fake news. And his base says, yeah, that's right. Sky's not blue. Water's not wet. Because the president said it's not true. And that's what becomes the political discourse, or what passes for truth in America. We have seen the huge rise in hate groups, the right-wing hate groups, the meteoric rise of Klan and Nazis and Aryan type organizations. We have seen at these rallies that he has huge numbers of people who are shouting hate. And I'm not the only one who said this, they remind us of lynch mobs, because you had lynch mobs in this country where you'd have hundreds and in some cases thousands of people come to lynch someone or someones, and it was the most barbaric thing you ever wanted to see. They would beat them, shoot them, hang them, burn them, cut off their genitals, hang the bodies or the corpse up on lampposts and leave them hanging there for days. Just unbelievable. Well, when I look at those mobs or those so-called rallies like this one, no, I'm sorry, that's Bernie. That's not Trump. But when I look at those rallies where he's spewing all that hate, it should scare us. It should scare us. You know, we've also seen the rise of police brutality, uh, because he's urged them on too. So it's like, well, is this where we are in 2018? We're getting ready to have this off-year election, and what's been deep is that off-year elections generally are fairly low turnouts. And what has been historically true, going back 40, 50 years, is that in off-year elections, whoever's in the whatever party's in the White House, they lose seats in the House and also often the Senate as well in off-year elections. But because of this president, this resident's hate mongering tours and rallies, he has stirred up so much stuff to get his base and other whites to go to the polls to vote, he says, for him, but by electing and re-electing Republicans. And what we have now is just this serious, what they call it, red against the blue states, the red states. And that's some sick stuff. But it has furthered the polarization of America, where he not just calls out the media, he has been calling out the Democrats and accusing them of all kinds of things. He accuses them out of his own mouth. He accuses the Democrats of being behind the so-called caravans, as he calls them. These are migrants from certain South American countries who have been on basically a walk, a march to come to the United States and ask for asylum. Okay, which is the right. That is the right. That's the law. It allows for anybody from any country to present themselves to the border authorities and ask for asylum and ask to be allowed into the country because they're fleeing whatever it is in their home country. In this particular case, it's kind of deep because many of them are from countries in South America that the United States intelligence agencies and the military has been for many years. They were down there fomenting coups and trouble. They're the ones behind this. And I actually believe that some of those intelligence agencies and spy agencies, etc., purposely sent these uh, refugees towards the United States, or at least pushing them out of their own country, make them refugees, in order to help the resident have something to raise heck about, because he's been acting like it's an invasion. He's got now troops, military troops, going to the border to protect the border, to stop these hordes from coming and attacking and invading America. Even though U.S. military cannot do anything inside the borders of the United States like that. They can't protect the borders like that. All they can do is assist the Border Patrol. But he's been making it into a whole war thing, stirring up anger and hatred among folks, like there's some kind of thundering hordes of invaders and killers coming to the United States. I mean, it's disgraceful. But I guess what bothers me so much is that it doesn't bother so many people. Let me say it again. It doesn't bother so many people. See, it bothers some, but it doesn't bother so many people. And again, I'm struck by how that was similar during the lynching age era. You see, at one time in this country, for a number of years, at least 25 to 30 years straight. There were lynchings, 2 to 3 a month, sometimes a couple of times a week, somewhere in this country. And nobody was getting arrested, none of that. In fact, the newspapers would print up stories beforehand and afterwards. And this went on for 25 to 30 years. And yes, there were a few people that said, oh, that's terrible. You know that they never made it against the law. Ida B. Wells Barnett and others, they fought to get a federal law called the anti-lynching law. It was never passed. So when we started having, again, a period of time in this country where you started having a police shooting of a black person once or twice a month, sometimes several in a week. And this would go on for months and months, and then it turned into several years. And before we knew it, we had a decade of this. And because of social media and different communications platforms and channels, we were able to communicate across the country to each other about stuff. So it brought attention to some of these murders. But that was also frustrating too, because in so many cases, nothing happened. The police weren't prosecuted. And so it took years of fighting back. And now we have a few cases where occasionally a policeman might get indicted. Uh, we had a recent case in Chicago, Illinois, where a policeman was not only indicted for murder, but was convicted of murder. But we still got our eyes on that because they're not through with the finagling around this situation. In fact, his family, this police, his name is Van Dyke, his family uh, has gotten, well, they did a GoFundMe page for his family, which has raised over $125,000 to help them tide them over while he's in jail. But he's also gotten all kinds of gifts and stuff because they moved him out of Chicago and they got him in a jail somewhere up in some suburb or something. And so he's doing very well there. So again, that's an issue. That became the new lynching, having the police do it. We have now moved into a new level, and I have to mention it in this way. Um, Within the last week or two, there has been a series of bombs that were mailed to not only to the homes of 2 former presidents, but also some Congress people and some others who were outspoken critics of the resident in the White House. The man who they have arrested and charged with it is it's still kind of funny whether or not he did it by himself. You had an avowed racist trying to get into a church, and a black church, and he was locked out. So he walked over across the street to a grocery store, shot a black man in the back of his head, walked out of there and shot a black woman to death. Told a white man who saw him, he said, whites don't kill whites. No, what did he say? Whites don't shoot whites. So that he was telling the white man, don't worry, I'm not going to shoot you. What I didn't know until much later, because this was not in the news that I saw, is that when he came out of the store after shooting the black man in the back of the head, there was a black couple who were getting ready to go in the store, and they saw him with the gun, and he went over to the black woman because the husband was getting out of his car or something, whatever. The black woman was standing next to another black woman who was on the phone trying to get a ride home. He went over to these two black women and he shot the other black woman in the and shot her and killed her. And the other black woman, her husband, brought out his gun, and the two guys went to shooting at each other. He was trying to protect his wife. Neither one of them hit anything, but it allowed her and the husband to not be shot. When the police got there, they arrested him, the white guy. You know, they don't seem to have a problem with shooting black people, who are unarmed or armed, but they didn't shoot this white guy. And at first, they took in the brother who had the shootout with them, but then they eventually had to let him go because he was simply shooting back at this guy who was killing people. Now, the reason I say I didn't know about this till the other day is that this was not in the national news that I saw, and it got a certain amount of coverage, but not near one of them mentioned that there was a brother who had his own gun who got into a shootout with this guy in order to save him and his wife. They didn't want us to see this, that the brother was using armed self-defense. Okay? I just happened to come across that story. I said, what? But that's how they do us. And then, of course, you had the incident where a guy, white man, went to a Jewish synagogue, killed 11 people. And he also, now he was shot 3 or 4 times by the police, but they didn't kill him. Man. Then, of course, with all the voting stuff going on, and I have to mention that because it's important in terms of us looking at what's going on today. The black woman that you see right there, she's running for governor of Georgia. Her name is Stacey Abrams. There's two major gubernatorial elections that are in the midst of. I think there's a dozen governors races, but these two, the governor's race in Georgia and the governor's race in Florida. You see Stacey Abrams, the black woman in Georgia, and in Florida, it's a brother named Andrew Gillum running for governor. Both of them are running against staunch racist white men. And they have been catching all kinds of hell. In the case of Stacey Abrams in Georgia, the guy she's running against, Kemp, he's the Secretary of State, which controls the voting registration and the voting and stuff. He's been doing all kinds of stuff, actually for years, in manipulating the voting registrations and the voting and stuff. It should be a conflict of interest that he shouldn't be allowed to do that. He should have nothing to do with voting because he's in the race. There have been several cases that went to court and the judges have ruled against whatever he was doing. In both of them, Gillum and Abrams have had racist robocalls launched against them by somebody who doesn't even live in either state. It's a guy from a right-wing organization, a white supremacist organization, has these calls made and paid for, and then they launched them in both states against them. One recently, Oprah Winfrey went to Georgia to campaign for Stacey Abrams, and before she could even get out of the state, there was a robocall launched in the state of Georgia, just racist, with somebody who was pretending to be Oprah Winfrey, just saying all kind of racist stuff. And these robocalls went. See, the robocalls don't go to black people. They go to white people. And they go to white people to stir them up. And one of the things that's been happening this year is that, actually the last 2 years really, there's been a serious effort to get the Republican voters to go to the polls. What we didn't see, what was going on behind our backs, was the right wing has been doing voters registrations for white people and voter suppression of black people. And they had millions and millions and millions of dollars to do it. The Democrats, on the other hand, have had a fractured situation because they really didn't know what to do. When Hillary lost the election, even though she won the popular vote, it left the Democratic Party at a loss because they didn't know what to do. What do we do now? And what was the message? What should the message be? It couldn't be just we're against Trump, because Trump was organizing on the basis of attacking the media and the Democratic Party, blaming them for everything, and straight up lying. The Democrats, trying to be all nice and crap, said we're not going to go low, we're going to go high. No, 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 you don't. When you're dealing with people who are using violence and hate, being nice, trying to reach common ground, that doesn't work. So you had these mostly white Democrats saying we have to find ways to work with these people. And no, they already told you they don't want to work with you. You know? And the black folks, they were subjected to deep stuff, from the Russians to the operatives for the Republican Party, who are sowing dissent, especially among our young black people, telling them, first of all, your vote doesn't matter, it doesn't count. And the Democrats have been using you, so stop letting them use you. And we don't want you either, but you shouldn't vote for them people. They don't care nothing about you. And what that does, it demoralizes the people. See, when you don't have any choices, or when you believe you don't have any choices, and that's what you hear a lot of times, especially from younger people, that say, well, the Democrats don't care nothing about us, and maybe I'll just vote Republican. Well, that happened in the last election. That's one of the reasons you got Trump in the White House, because you actually had some that voted, or say, for example, for Bernie. Here's the problem. In a two-party system, third and fourth parties don't really get any traction. And so voting for those parties is a wasted vote. And in some cases, it can help the opposition. And when you have people believing, as some did, that there was no difference between Trump and Clinton, there was no difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, you end up with what we got today. To some degree, I'm afraid. Yeah, Clyde says, exactly. Thanks for sharing that. Major media only indicated the shootout and not with whom. Yeah. Talking about what happened with the white man that shot the two black people. So here we are heading towards the end of 2018 with a huge vote coming up in a few days. And it's being positioned this way, that if the Democratic Party can win enough seats in the House of Representatives, that would at least get them back in the majority of the House. And that would take away one of the places where the Republicans have the majority. They got the White House, they got the Senate, and presently they have the House of Representatives as well. And it has allowed them to do several things, like especially with the Supreme Court, to put two straight up conservatives on the Supreme Court and give the Supreme Court the opposite of what was there for many years, that allowed for a lot of changes in this country over the last 40, 50 years. So when you hear this phrase about make America great again, all that can mean is taking the country backwards. Because the only time it's been great is when white people had it great for them. It has never been great for black people. And any black person that tells you, oh, the good old days, they can only mean it on a small level, because this country has never been good for black people. That's why we had to fight every daggone day. If a law was made that's supposed to help black people, we had to fight it. We had to fight for it to be enforced. If whether it was on a state level or a federal level. So it has never been great. It's always held the promise of greatness. But remember where that started. It started out saying, take America back, take the country back. That was the right-wing slogan, the Tea Parties and stuff. Remember them? See, people thought that was a joke. But take America back and take it backwards. That's where we are today. We are actually being dragged backwards. We see it when we see white people coming out of the closets calling the police on black people from one end of the country to the other. White people, mostly white women, but they call them and the police come. We have young black people who don't know what to do. And we have a lot of young black people who are truly lost. And because our communities don't educate nor employ our young people are susceptible to others' influence. It's easier for a young black person, male or female, but especially young black males, it's easier for them to get a gun than to get a book. That should shake us all up. We should all say, what in the hell is this about? That it's easier for a young black man to get a gun than to get a book? Easier for him to get a gun than to get a job? So, as we close out this year, 2018, in some ways things don't look good. We'll have a better picture of certain things when we get to the election coming up. Hopefully, we will be mobilized enough, and there's been a lot of early voting. They've set records all across this country to early voting, but we don't know yet whether that's good or bad. I know in a lot of cases, a lot of black people have been early voting, but we did that before. What we had not seen was so many white people early voting. So there's a possibility that the Democratic Party can take back control of the House of Representatives. That would allow for some a balance against the resident and his foolishness. And some people say, well, that's also where we can get this impeachment. I don't think impeachment is going to happen. I think if anything, if Mueller's investigation, the special prosecutor can do anything, He may be able to force, like, see, what we have to understand is Mueller's investigation will do this. They will come up with a report, and they will send that report to the Attorney General. The Attorney General will then have to decide what to do. So let's say he comes up with 1,000 crimes. He's sending it to the Attorney General that is appointed by the president. And he can decide not to prosecute. There's some kind of belief that a sitting president can't be indicted. That's not necessarily true, but that's the going belief. And what we need to understand is that should he decide, talking about the Attorney General gets this report and it's full of crimes, should he decide not to prosecute, supposedly the House of Representatives and the Senate can look at the evidence as well, and they may decide to do something. I don't know. But if they can come up with enough crimes that are strong enough, they may get him to resign, as they did with Nixon. But the problem with that is that this dude, he's not a Nixon. He's not a Nixon. And he would let everybody go to jail, including his own children, before he would do anything. Or he gonna give up office. So we'll see what happens. I wish I had some answers. All I know is that I believe we should, meaning black people, I believe we should not listen to those who say this. Black people are not a monolith, and we need to vote based on our own thinking and don't worry about party lines. The problem with that is this: the power we have is as a quote monolith, meaning voting as a block. Black people are the margin of victory in a lot of situations, meaning that we can determine the result of a lot of different elections, which is why they've spent so many years and efforts and money to get us divided, to get us thinking that we should not vote as a block. See, they vote as blocks. What do you think the Republican and Democratic Party is? It's a block. They held out and kept Bernie from being even in the election process for real, because he's an independent. We should not give up our power, and our power is as a block, a voting block. When we do that, we allow ourselves to be diluted, we just become a bunch of colored people voting in different directions and don't really have no power. And I know some people are going to say, oh, that's old thinking. Well, if you're being dragged backwards, then look at how do we get forward. We got forward by voting as a block, by recognizing we were the margin of victory and voting as blocks in different situations. Okay? And another way we got it was not by turning our cheek and getting the crap kicked out of us. Some said, no, you ain't gonna kick me. As they used to say, we got to bring some behind to get some behind. In any case, I'm going to close out here. And hopefully I said some things that will cause you to think. And hopefully I said some things that will cause you to do your own research. And hopefully you'll make sure that you do something to make sure somebody else gets to vote if you have the time and the means to take somebody to the polls to make sure they get there to vote. By the way, that graphic you're looking at right now, that's a Nazi rally in the United States. It was at in New York City at Madison Square Garden. Yep, a Nazi rally in New York. See, when you talk about make America great again, talk about taking the country back, you have to understand where that was, where it is that they're talking about going to. Yeah. Hmm. All right, as always, I say thank you, Clyde. And I say no justice, no peace, no love, KNOW. And I hope that you voted or you plan to vote. And let's see if we can do some damage. Because we got to stop this because, look, I can't go through this again, another 50 years of fighting just for civil rights or, you know, I don't want to see our grandchildren doing it either. But at least if they do have to do it, I want them to be conscious of what they're doing and why. And so, as long as I got breath and I'm able to do it, I'll continue to do consciousness raising online. All right. Peace.